The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. On the grainy security footage, I watched a man enter my daughter's bedroom. He stood there in the darkness for 11 minutes, perfectly still, just watching her sleep. His face was turned away from the camera, but I knew exactly who it was. I'd know that posture anywhere, the way he held his shoulders, the familiar wedding ring catching the hallway light. It was my husband. And my daughter wasn't our daughter. Not biologically, anyway. My hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped my phone. The coffee I'd been drinking lurched in my stomach, threatening to come back up. Because in that frozen moment, watching that silent figure standing over a sleeping child in the dead of night, I realized I didn't know the man I'd been married to for 6 years at all. The question that paralyzed me wasn't what is he doing. It was how long has this been happening? 3 weeks earlier. Sarah Mackenzie had always considered herself a good mother. Not perfect, she'd never claimed that, but attentive, loving, present. The kind of mother who packed lunches with handwritten notes, who knew all the words to her daughter's favorite songs, who could detect a fake smile from across a room. That's why Emma's words hit her like a physical blow. "Mom, I don't like that uncle." They were standing in the kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, golden autumn light streaming through the windows. Sarah had been chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic thunk-thunk-thunk of the knife against the cutting board creating a domestic symphony she found oddly soothing. Emma, 7 years old with her dark curls pulled into a lopsided ponytail, sat at the kitchen table coloring. Or she had been coloring. Now she was just sitting there, gripping a purple crayon so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Sarah set down the knife carefully. "What uncle, sweetheart?" "Uncle Marcus." Emma's voice was small, uncertain. She didn't look up from her coloring book, but Sarah noticed she'd stopped coloring altogether. The page before her showed a half-finished butterfly, one wing vibrant purple, the other blank and waiting. Marcus, Sarah's younger brother. The fun uncle who brought presents, who played hide-and-seek for hours, who made Emma laugh until she got the hiccups. "Why don't you like Uncle Marcus?" Sarah kept her voice light, casual, even as something cold began to unfurl in her chest. She dried her hands on a dish towel, buying herself time to think. Did something happen? Emma shrugged, a small, tight gesture. "He's just weird." Weird how? But Emma had already returned to her coloring, pressing the purple crayon down so hard it snapped in half. She stared at the broken pieces in her hand like she'd never seen a broken crayon before, and Sarah watched her daughter's face crumple slightly before she carefully, deliberately, set both pieces on the table. "Never mind," Emma whispered. Sarah wanted to press. Every instinct screamed at her to sit down, pull Emma onto her lap, and gently extract whatever was bothering her. But she'd read the parenting books. She knew about creating safe spaces, not overwhelming children, letting them open up in their own time. So she didn't push. She would regret that decision for the rest of her life. Sarah Mackenzie hadn't always been Sarah Mackenzie. 6 years ago, she'd been Sarah Chen, a divorced single mother barely keeping her head above water. Emma had been 18 months old then, a toddler with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Sarah's ex-husband, David, had walked out when Emma was 3 months old, declaring that fatherhood wasn't for him, as if it were a hobby he could simply quit. The divorce had been bitter and exhausting. David fought for nothing, not custody, not visitation rights, not even the furniture, except for one thing: he wanted to make sure Sarah got nothing from him. No child support, no alimony, nothing. His lawyer was expensive, hers was not. In the end, David had gotten his wish. Sarah had been working 2 jobs, legal secretary by day, bartender by night, when she met Thomas Mackenzie. He'd come into the bar on a Thursday evening, ordered a whiskey neat, and left a 40% tip. The next Thursday, he came back. Same drink, same generous tip, and this time, he'd smiled at her. A real smile, warm and reaching his eyes, not the leering grins she was used to deflecting. By the 3rd Thursday, they were talking. By the 6th, he'd asked her to dinner. Thomas was different from David in every conceivable way. Where David had been impulsive and selfish, Thomas was thoughtful and generous. Where David had been loud and demanding, Thomas was quiet and patient. He had a steady job as a software engineer, a modest but comfortable home, and most importantly, he didn't run when Sarah mentioned she had a daughter. "I love kids," he'd said simply, and the way he said it, like it was the most natural thing in the world, had made something tight in Sarah's chest finally loosen. Their courtship had been wonderfully, refreshingly normal. Thomas came to toddler birthday parties. He learned to install car seats. He read bedtime stories with funny voices that made Emma giggle. When he proposed, Emma had been more excited than Sarah, jumping up and down and asking if this meant Thomas would be her real daddy. "If you want me to be," Thomas had said, kneeling down to Emma's level, "I would be honored." The wedding had been small and perfect. Emma had been their flower girl, taking her job with such serious concentration that she'd counted each petal she dropped. Sarah's mother had cried. Even Marcus, usually so irreverent and sarcastic, had gotten misty-eyed during the vows. Thomas had legally adopted Emma within the year. Emma Mackenzie, their family complete. For 5 years, it had been everything Sarah had dreamed of. Thomas was an involved, loving father. He coached Emma's soccer team, helped with homework, never missed a school play. They were the kind of family Sarah had desperately wanted to give her daughter, stable, secure, whole. But now, standing in her kitchen on this ordinary Tuesday, watching her daughter struggle with something she couldn't articulate, Sarah felt the first hairline fracture appear in the life she'd so carefully built. Marcus Chen had always been the golden child, charming, successful, the baby of the family who could do no wrong. At 32, he was a pharmaceutical sales representative with a corner apartment downtown and a rotation of beautiful girlfriends who never seemed to last more than a few months. He drove a BMW he couldn't quite afford and wore suits that looked expensive even when they weren't. Sarah loved her brother, but she'd never quite trusted him. There was something performative about Marcus, like he was always auditioning for a role in his own life. Their mother doted on him. Their father, before he died, had always slipped Marcus extra money despite his own financial struggles. Marcus had a gift for making people like him. He remembered birthdays, brought wine to dinner parties, always knew the right compliment to offer. With Emma, he was particularly doting, playing Princess Tea Party for hours, bringing her small gifts just because, volunteering to babysit whenever Sarah and Thomas needed a date night. Sarah had been grateful for it. Touched, even. Emma adored her Uncle Marcus, and Sarah had thought it was sweet, the way her brother had stepped into an uncle role with such enthusiasm. But now, replaying every interaction through the lens of Emma's words, Sarah felt something sour rising in her throat. Weird how? The question haunted her through dinner that evening. Thomas had come home late, apologizing profusely. A meeting had run over. He'd kissed Sarah's cheek, ruffled Emma's hair, and dug into the slightly overcooked chicken without complaint. They were good at this, the domestic routine. Thomas asked about Emma's day. Emma told him about art class. Sarah half listened, pushing food around her plate, her mind elsewhere. "Sarah, you okay?" She looked up to find Thomas watching her, concern creasing his forehead. He had kind eyes, Thomas. Warm brown, always seemed to catch the light just right. She'd fallen in love with those eyes. "Fine," she said automatically. "Just tired." But she wasn't fine. That night, after Emma was tucked in and Thomas was watching television downstairs, Sarah found herself standing in Emma's doorway, watching her daughter sleep. Emma slept like she did everything else, with complete commitment, sprawled across the bed like a starfish, one arm dangling off the edge, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in a death grip. 7 years old, so small, so vulnerable. "I don't like that, Uncle." Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Marcus. "Hey sis, can I come by this weekend? Been too long since I've seen my favorite niece." Usually, Sarah would respond immediately with enthusiastic agreement. Tonight, she stared at the message for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "Maybe next weekend. This week is crazy." The 3 dots appeared immediately. Marcus was typing, then they disappeared, then reappeared. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just busy. Talk soon." She silenced her phone and slipped into Emma's room, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Emma stirred slightly but didn't wake. In the dim glow of the nightlight, a turtle that projected stars across the ceiling, her daughter looked impossibly young. Sarah reached out, gently brushing a curl from Emma's forehead. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered, "always." But the promise felt hollow, because Sarah was beginning to suspect she'd already failed. The next morning, Sarah did something she'd never done before. She called in sick to work. She wasn't sick, not physically, but the knot of anxiety in her stomach had tightened overnight, becoming something urgent and impossible to ignore. After dropping Emma at school, watching perhaps too carefully as her daughter skipped toward the building, seeming cheerful and normal, Sarah drove home and did what any modern parent would do. She Googled how to tell if your child is being abused. The search results made her physically ill. Article after article, checklist after checklist, each one a catalog of horrors she didn't want to imagine. But she forced herself to read them, comparing Emma's behavior against the warning signs. Changes in behavior or personality. Emma had been quieter lately, hadn't she? Less bubbly at dinner, more subdued during their bedtime routine. Regression to younger behaviors. Last week, Emma had asked if she could sleep in Sarah and Thomas's room, something she hadn't done in years. Sarah had gently refused, not wanting to encourage the behavior. Now she wondered if that had been a mistake. Inappropriate sexual knowledge or behavior. Sarah's stomach lurched. Nothing she could think of. Emma was 7, still innocent, still thought boys had cooties. Fear of specific people or places. "I don't like that, Uncle." Sarah closed the laptop, pressing her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. She was overreacting. She had to be. Marcus was her brother. She'd known him her entire life. He wasn't, he couldn't be. But wasn't that what everyone said? The neighbors interviewed after an arrest, the family members defending the accused. But he seemed so normal, we never would have guessed. Sarah's phone rang, making her jump. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," she answered, trying to sound normal. "Hey yourself, feeling okay? You sounded rough this morning." Had she? Sarah couldn't remember. The morning was already a blur. "Just needed a day," she said. "I'll be fine." "Good. Listen, I hate to do this, but I'm going to be late again tonight. Client presentation ran into some issues, and we need to fix them before tomorrow's pitch." "How late?" 8, maybe 9. "I'm sorry, babe. I know it's the 3rd time this week." It was actually the 4th, but Sarah didn't correct him. "It's fine. We'll save you dinner." After they hung up, Sarah sat in the silent house, listening to the old pipes groan and the neighbor's dog bark in the distance. Thomas had been working late a lot recently. A big project, he'd said. Important client. She'd been understanding because that's what partners did. They supported each other's careers. But now, in the paranoid space her mind had entered, she wondered. Was he really working late? Or was this just the kind of detail that would later seem significant, the kind detectives would circle in red pen when reconstructing a timeline? She was being crazy, paranoid, letting one ambiguous comment from a 7-year-old spiral into wild conspiracy theories. But then Sarah remembered something Emma had said about a month ago. They'd been shopping for school supplies, and Emma had suddenly grabbed Sarah's hand, squeezing tight. "Mom, if someone tells you not to tell a secret, should you keep it?" Sarah had been distracted, comparing prices on notebooks. "Depends on the secret, sweetie. Some secrets are okay to keep, but if someone tells you to keep a secret that makes you feel bad or scared, you should always tell a trusted grown-up. Even if they say something bad will happen if you tell." Sarah had frozen then, really hearing her daughter for the first time. "Especially then, baby. That's not a secret you should keep." But Emma had just nodded and let go of her hand, and then she'd been distracted by a display of gel pens, and the moment had passed. Sarah had filed it away as a general question, the kind kids asked when learning about the world. Now that memory took on a sinister cast. Had Emma been trying to tell her something? Had Sarah missed a cry for help? Without fully deciding to do it, Sarah found herself pulling up her laptop again, this time navigating to a different kind of website. Security cameras. The house didn't have any, they'd never felt the need, but that could change. By noon, she'd ordered a system. 4 cameras with night vision, motion detection, cloud storage. Discreet, the website promised. Easy to install. She paid extra for next-day delivery. Then she spent the rest of the afternoon trying to convince herself she was overreacting. The cameras arrived on Thursday. Sarah installed them herself while Emma was at school and Thomas was at work, following the instructions with shaking hands. 1 camera in the living room, positioned to capture the front door and main hallway. 1 in the kitchen. 1 in the upstairs hallway, angled to see all the bedroom doors. And 1, carefully hidden on Emma's bookshelf, disguised as a stuffed owl. Sarah felt sick installing that one. What kind of mother surveilled her own child's bedroom? But then she thought of that conversation. I don't like that, uncle, and she adjusted the camera until it had a clear view of Emma's bed and doorway. The app on her phone showed all 4 camera feeds in a neat grid. She tested it, walking through the house, watching herself on the small screen. The quality was better than she'd expected. Even in Emma's room, with just the nightlight, the night vision showed everything clearly. Thomas came home early that evening, a pleasant surprise, and immediately noticed something was off. Did you rearrange Emma's bookshelf? Sarah's heart skipped. Just straightening up, you know how messy her room gets. He accepted this with a shrug, but Sarah caught him glancing at the stuffed owl twice during bedtime stories that night. She held her breath, waiting for him to say something, but he just kissed Emma's forehead and turned out the light. In their own room later, as Thomas scrolled through his phone and Sarah pretended to read a book, she studied her husband. Really looked at him for the first time in how long? They'd been married 6 years, together for 7. She knew his face as well as her own, the small scar on his chin from a childhood bike accident, the way his left eyebrow quirked up when he was amused, the reading glasses he was too vain to wear except at home. He looked the same, completely normal, the man she loved. So why did she suddenly feel like she was sharing a bed with a stranger? Sarah, she started, You've been staring at me for like 5 minutes. Something on my face. Sorry, just thinking. About whether I know you at all. About what secrets you might be keeping. About whether I've been blind. Work stuff, she lied. Thomas set down his phone, turning to face her fully. You sure that's all? You've been weird since Tuesday. Did something happen? The concern in his voice sounded genuine. Everything about Thomas seemed genuine. That was what had attracted her in the first place, his apparent authenticity, the way he seemed incapable of pretense. But people could fake anything, couldn't they? Even sincerity. I'm fine, Sarah said. Just stressed. The Johansson case is a mess. It wasn't, but Thomas didn't know the details of her work. He nodded, accepting the explanation, and pulled her close. Sarah let herself be held, fitting into the familiar curve of his body, breathing in his familiar scent, cedar and coffee and something uniquely him. She wanted to believe everything was fine. God, how she wanted to believe it. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she gave up trying, carefully extracting herself from Thomas's embrace and padding downstairs. She made chamomile tea she didn't drink, standing at the kitchen window and staring out at their quiet suburban street. They'd bought this house 3 years ago. Sarah had loved it immediately, the big backyard for Emma to play in, the good school district, the friendly neighbors who brought over casseroles when you moved in. It was everything her own chaotic childhood hadn't been. Stable, safe, normal. On impulse, Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the security camera app. All 4 feeds showed empty, still rooms. The living room dark except for the streetlight glow through the windows. The kitchen where she currently stood, captured from the corner. She watched herself on the screen, a woman in pajamas holding a cooling cup of tea. The upstairs hallway, nothing but shadows. And Emma's room, where their daughter slept peacefully, the gentle rise and fall of the blanket covering her small form. Sarah watched her daughter sleep through the screen and felt like the world's worst mother, and the world's most vigilant ones simultaneously. Friday afternoon, Marcus showed up unannounced. Sarah answered the door to find her brother on the porch, his trademark charming smile in place, holding a bag from the toy store downtown. "Surprise," he announced. "I know you said maybe next weekend, but I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off Emma's birthday present early." Emma's birthday wasn't for another 3 weeks. "Marcus, this really isn't a good time," Sarah started, but Emma had heard his voice and came running. "Uncle Marcus." Except she didn't sound excited. She sounded uncertain, performing excitement rather than feeling it. Sarah watched her daughter approach Marcus and saw what she'd been blind to before, the slight hesitation in Emma's step. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The way she accepted Marcus's hug but didn't really lean into it. "I don't like that, Uncle." "Hey, Munchkin," Marcus swept Emma up, spinning her around the way he always did. Emma laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Guess what Uncle Marcus brought you?" "Marcus, really, we were just about to head out." Sarah tried again. "Just for a few minutes. Come on, sis. I never get to see my favorite girls anymore." There was something in his tone, not quite accusatory but pointed, like he knew he was being shut out and wanted to understand why. Sarah felt trapped between instinct and social obligation. How did you tell your own brother he couldn't see his niece without explaining why? And what was she going to say? "My daughter said something vague, and now I'm suspicious of everyone." 10 minutes, Sarah heard herself say. "We really do have plans." They didn't have plans. Marcus settled onto the living room couch, Emma perched on the chair across from him. Sarah noted the distance and produced the gift with a flourish. A dollhouse, elaborate and expensive, the kind Sarah would never have spent money on. "It's beautiful," Sarah said automatically. "Can I set it up in your room, Em? I want to make sure all the little furniture pieces are in the right place." Emma's eyes went wide. Just for a moment, Sarah saw naked fear. "Maybe later," Sarah intervened quickly. "Emma's room is a disaster right now. Let's set it up down here." Was she imagining the flash of annoyance on Marcus's face? The way his smile tightened just a fraction. They spent 10 awkward minutes setting up the dollhouse, Marcus chattering away about his work. A new girlfriend, this one was different, he promised. A vacation he was planning to Costa Rica. Sarah contributed minimal responses, watching, just watching. And maybe she was crazy, maybe she was seeing things that weren't there, but she could have sworn that every time Marcus thought no one was looking, his eyes drifted to the stairs, to the second floor, to where the bedrooms were. When he finally left, 20 minutes, not 10, Sarah locked the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart pounding. "Mom," Emma's small voice, "are you mad at me?" Sarah's heart broke. "What? No, baby, why would I be mad at you?" "I wasn't very nice to Uncle Marcus." "Sweetheart, come here." Sarah knelt down, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "You don't have to be nice to anyone who makes you uncomfortable. Not even Uncle Marcus. Not even family. Your feelings matter, and if someone makes you feel bad or weird, you don't have to pretend everything's okay." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her face pressed against Sarah's shoulder. When she finally spoke, her voice was tiny, muffled. "He plays a game." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What kind of game?" But Emma had already pulled away, shaking her head. "Never mind, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack?" And just like that, the moment was gone, Emma skipping toward the kitchen like nothing had happened, leaving Sarah kneeling on the floor, those 3 words echoing in her mind. He plays a game. That night, Sarah told Thomas she was going to her book club. She didn't have a book club. Instead, she drove to a coffee shop across town, ordered a drink she didn't want, and called her mother. Patricia Chen answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm with surprise. "Sarah, what a lovely surprise. Is everything all right?" Was it? Sarah had no idea anymore. "Mom, can I ask you something about Marcus?" A pause. "Of course, honey, what about him?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "When we were growing up, was there ever anything unusual about him, particularly around younger kids?" Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could hear the television in the background, her mother's favorite crime show. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Why are you asking?" "Just answer the question, please." Her mother sighed, the sound crackling through the phone line. "Marcus was always very good with children. You remember, even when he was a teenager, he'd volunteer to babysit the neighbor kids. I used to think it was so mature of him." "Used to, past tense." "And now," Sarah pressed. "Now I think, oh, Sarah, I don't know what I think. He's my son, your brother. But sometimes I wonder if I was willfully blind." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "Mom, what are you saying?" "There was an incident, years ago before you and Thomas got married. One of Marcus's girlfriend's younger sisters. She was about 10, I think. She told her parents that Marcus made her uncomfortable. That he'd play games with her when no one was looking. Wrestling games, tickling games. Things that seemed innocent but felt wrong." Sarah's coffee cup slipped from her numb fingers, splashing across the table. She barely noticed. "What happened?" "The girlfriend ended the relationship. The family didn't press charges because nothing explicitly inappropriate had happened. It was all just feelings, innuendo. Marcus denied everything, said the girl was making it up for attention. And I believed him because he's my son and I wanted to believe him." "Jesus Christ, Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I convinced myself it was nothing. And it was so long ago, and Marcus had been nothing but wonderful with Emma. I thought if it had been something real, it would have shown up again. But it didn't. He's been the perfect uncle." The perfect uncle. Wasn't that always how these stories went? "Mom, I have to G." "Oh." "Sarah, wait, is Emma okay? Has Marcus done something, Sarah?" But Sarah had already hung up, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. She sat in the coffee shop, surrounded by people having normal Friday night conversations, and felt like she was drowning. "He plays a game." Those 3 words from Emma suddenly had context, history, a pattern. How had she not known? How had her mother kept this secret? Sarah drove home in a fugue state, barely remembering the route. Thomas's car was in the driveway when she pulled up. He was home early again. She sat in her own driveway for 10 minutes, trying to compose herself, trying to figure out what to tell him. Everything, nothing. In the end, she decided on a version of the truth. Thomas was in the kitchen when she came in, finishing up the dinner dishes. "Hey, how was book club? You're home early." "It was canceled," Sarah said. The lie came easily. "Last-minute thing." "Bummer, Emma's already in bed. She seemed tired. I think she's coming down with something." Or traumatized, but Sarah didn't say that. Instead, she approached her husband, studying his face. Thomas looked back at her quizzically, then grinned. "Okay, this is the second time this week you've just stared at me. Do I have something in my teeth?" "Thomas, if I asked you something, would you tell me the truth?" His grin faded. "Of course. Sarah, what's going on? You've been acting strange all week." "Have you noticed anything off about Emma lately?" Thomas set down the dish towel, giving her his full attention. "Off how?" "Quieter, more withdrawn, like something's bothering her." He considered this. "Maybe a little. I figured it was just school stuff. You know how kids are, everything's dramatic at that age." "Has she said anything to you? About anyone making her uncomfortable?" "No, Sarah, you're scaring me. What's this about?" She wanted to tell him everything. Every suspicion, every sick feeling in her gut, every horrible possibility her mind had conjured over the past week. But something held her back. Some instinct she couldn't name. Just something she said about Marcus, that she doesn't like him, and when I pressed her, she mentioned he plays a game with her. Thomas's face changed, hardened. For just a moment, Sarah saw something cold flash in his eyes. "What kind of game?" "She wouldn't tell me, but Thomas, I called my mom tonight. There was an incident years ago, before we got married. Another little girl who said Marcus made her uncomfortable." "Jesus." Thomas ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah recognized as stress. "And you're only hearing about this now." "My mom thought, I don't know what she thought. that it was nothing, that Marcus was innocent. Do you think he is? The question hung between them. Sarah shook her head slowly. I don't know anything anymore. Thomas pulled her into his arms, and Sarah let herself be held, breathing in his familiar scent, trying to find comfort in the solid reality of him. We need to figure this out, he said into her hair. We need to protect Emma, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, Sarah echoed. She didn't notice the way Thomas's eyes drifted toward the stairs as he said it. Didn't see the slight twitch of his jaw, like he was making a decision. She was too busy trying not to fall apart. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt like a lie. Soccer game on Saturday, Emma scored a goal and beamed with pride. Family movie night, they watched Emma's Choice, some animated thing about talking animals. Sunday brunch at their favorite diner, chocolate chip pancakes all around. Through it all, Sarah watched her daughter, really watched her, looking for signs of trauma, hints of secrets, evidence of abuse. Emma seemed fine, mostly. She laughed at the movie. She ate her pancakes with enthusiasm. She fought with Thomas over whether she had to wear a jacket to the park. It's not even that cold, Dad. Was Sarah imagining things, building a nightmare from a handful of ambiguous comments? But then there were the small moments. The way Emma tensed when Sarah hugged her from behind. The nightmare Saturday night that left Emma tearful and clinging. The way she kept asking if they could lock her bedroom door from the inside. Why do you want to lock your door, sweetie? Sarah had asked gently. Just to feel safe, Emma had said, and then refused to elaborate. By Sunday night, Sarah was emotionally exhausted. After Emma went to bed, Sarah opened her phone to check the security cameras, a habit she'd developed, scrolling through the day's footage while Thomas watched television or worked on his laptop. Nothing was ever there, just the mundane documentation of their domestic life. Emma playing with dolls, Thomas grabbing a snack from the kitchen, the mail carrier delivering packages. Sarah was beginning to think she'd wasted money on the cameras, that they'd capture Noth. But her own paranoia when she saw it. Not on the current feed, but in the saved footage from Friday night, the night Marcus had visited. After he'd left, after Sarah had comforted Emma, after the conversation about feeling safe, there was a gap in the recording. 15 minutes of footage from Emma's room, simply gone. The timestamp jumped from 6:47 p.m. to 7:02 p.m. with nothing in between. Sarah's hands started shaking. Technical glitch? Maybe, but the other cameras showed no such gap. They'd recorded continuously throughout the evening. Someone had deleted that footage. Sarah went back further, checking other days. There. Another gap 3 days before Marcus's visit, and another a week before that. Small windows of time, missing from Emma's room camera only, always in the evening. Someone was deleting footage. Someone who had access to the cameras, to the app, to the cloud storage. Someone in this house. Sarah looked up from her phone to find Thomas watching her from the couch, his laptop still open, but clearly ignored. Something interesting, he asked. Just work emails, Sarah lied automatically. On a Sunday night. Never ends, you know how it is. Thomas nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on her a moment too long. You should get some rest. You look exhausted. She was exhausted. Exhausted and terrified and drowning in suspicions she couldn't voice. That night, Sarah pretended to sleep, waiting until Thomas's breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep. Then she carefully, silently, extracted herself from bed and crept downstairs. She opened her laptop, not her phone, which Thomas could theoretically track, and logged into the security camera account. She checked the access logs, the records of who had viewed or modified the footage. 2 users had accessed the account, her and one other. The username was just a string of letters and numbers, but when Sarah clicked through to the details, she felt the floor drop out from beneath her. The account had been created the same day she'd set up the cameras. It had logged in regularly, always in the evening, always viewing Emma's room camera. And it had deleted exactly 7 segments of footage over the past week. The location data, showed the login was coming from inside the house. Sarah sat in the dark kitchen, the laptop screen the only source of light, and felt reality tilt sideways. Someone in her house, either Thomas or Emma, and Emma was 7 years old, was accessing the security cameras she'd installed to protect her daughter, was watching the footage, was deleting specific segments. She thought about confronting Thomas right then, going upstairs, waking him up, demanding answers, but something stopped her. If Thomas was involved in whatever was happening, and God, even thinking that made her want to vomit, then tipping him off could be dangerous, could drive whatever was happening further underground. No, she needed proof, real, undeniable proof. Sarah changed the camera account password. Then she set up a new alert. Anytime the Emma's room camera detected motion between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., it would send her an immediate notification and save the footage to a separate, hidden cloud account that only she could access. Then she went back to bed and lay awake until dawn, listening to her husband breathe and wondering who he really was. Monday and Tuesday passed without incident. Sarah went to work, Emma went to school, Thomas worked his long hours. Sarah checked her phone compulsively, waiting for a motion alert that never came. Maybe she'd stopped it. Maybe whoever had been accessing the cameras had found themselves locked out and given up. Or maybe they were just waiting. Wednesday night, Thomas came home with flowers, a beautiful autumn bouquet, oranges and reds and golds. "What's the occasion?" Sarah asked, accepting them with surprise. Thomas wasn't usually the spontaneous flowers type. "Do I need an occasion to appreciate my beautiful wife?" He kissed her cheek, and Sarah tried to feel normal about it, tried not to flinch. They had dinner as a family. Spaghetti, Emma's favorite. Thomas told a funny story from work that made Emma laugh. They discussed plans for Emma's upcoming birthday party. Everything was perfectly, unbearably normal. At 8:30, Emma went to bed. Thomas said he had a couple hours of work to finish up, disappeared into his home office. Sarah cleaned the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down counters. Domestic tasks soothing in their routine. At 11:00, she went to bed alone. Thomas was still working. At 2:47 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected, Emma's room camera. Sarah's heart stopped. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it, opened the app, waited the agonizing seconds for the feed to load. And there, on her phone screen in grainy night vision, she watched a man enter her daughter's bedroom. He moved slowly, carefully, he'd done this before, like he knew where the squeaky floorboard was, which path would make the least noise. He stood in the doorway for a moment, a dark silhouette, before stepping fully into the room. Emma was asleep, her back to the door, curled on her side with her stuffed elephant. She didn't wake. The man stood over her bed, perfectly still, just watching her sleep. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stare at her phone screen in absolute horror. The man's face was turned away from the camera, but she could see enough. His height, his build, the shape of his shoulders, the wedding ring catching the dim light from the hallway. Thomas. Her husband, Emma's adopted father, the man who had promised to protect and love her daughter. Standing in their daughter's room at 2:47 in the morning, watching her sleep. He stood there for 11 minutes. Sarah timed it, watching the timestamp tick by in the corner of the screen, each second an eternity. He didn't touch Emma, didn't move closer, just stood there, watching. Then, as silently as he'd entered, he left. Sarah sat frozen in their bed, listening to Thomas's footsteps in the hall, the bathroom door closing, the toilet flushing, water running. The sounds of her husband completing his middle-of-the-night routine before coming back to bed. She closed the app and set down her phone carefully, precisely, like it might explode. Lay back down and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. When Thomas slid back into bed beside her, Sarah felt every muscle in her body lock up. But she kept her breathing even, pretended to be asleep, even as every cell screamed at her to run, to grab Emma and run and never stop running. Thomas settled in with a sigh, rolled over, went still. Within minutes, his breathing evened into sleep. How could he sleep? How could he lie there peacefully after? Sarah couldn't finish the thought, could barely allow herself to think it. Her husband, the man she loved, the man she'd trusted with her daughter, the man who'd promised to be Emma's father. I don't like that, Uncle. Not Uncle. Emma had been trying to warn her, and Sarah had been looking in the wrong direction entirely. The rest of the night passed in a horrified haze. Sarah didn't sleep, didn't move, just lay there planning. By the time the sun rose, she knew what she had to do. Thursday morning started like any other morning. Alarm at 6:30, Thomas's shower, the sounds of him getting dressed for work, Emma stumbling downstairs, sleepy-eyed, still in her pajamas. Sarah made breakfast on autopilot, poured cereal, sliced bananas, made coffee, smiled and chatted and acted normal even though she felt like she might fly apart at any moment. Big presentation today, Thomas said, kissing her goodbye at the door. Probably another late night, don't wait up. Good luck, Sarah said, and meant it in a way he'd never understand. Good luck because by tonight, everything would be different. After Thomas left, and Emma was safely at school, Sarah made a series of phone calls. First, to her boss. She needed to take the rest of the week off. Family emergency. No, she couldn't elaborate. She'd explain when she was back. Second, to her lawyer. A different kind of emergency. An urgent consultation. Yes, today, this afternoon if possible. Third, to Detective Linda Reeves with the local police department, a woman Sarah had worked with professionally on case files. They'd gotten coffee a few times, struck up a cautious friendship. Linda, I need advice, off the record. Sarah, what's wrong? You sound. If you had video evidence of someone entering a child's bedroom in the middle of the night and watching them sleep, what would you do with it? A long pause. Sarah, is Emma in danger? I don't know, maybe. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Who's the person in the video? Sarah's voice broke. My husband. Another pause, longer. Can you come to the station, now, and bring the video? By noon, Sarah was sitting in a police station conference room, watching 3 detectives view the security footage on a laptop. She'd sent them everything. The video from last night, the access logs showing the deleted footage, the pattern of middle-of-the-night visits she'd now documented. Detective Reeves, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a gentle manner, reached across the table to squeeze Sarah's hand. I know this is devastating, she said, but you did the right thing coming here. We'll investigate thoroughly. Has he? Sarah couldn't finish the question. We'll need to interview Emma, with a child psychologist present, very carefully, and we'll need to bring Thomas in for questioning. What if I'm wrong? Sarah whispered. What if there's some explanation? Then we'll figure that out, Reeves said firmly. But Sarah, I've been doing this job for 23 years. Men don't stand in little girls' bedrooms at 3 a.m. for innocent Rhea. Sons. The detective's words were both a relief and a condemnation. Sarah put her head in her hands and finally let herself cry. They didn't arrest Thomas immediately. First, they needed to interview Emma, which happened that afternoon at the Children's Advocacy Center, a place designed to be non-threatening, with toys and soft furniture and gentle-voiced counselors trained in trauma. Sarah sat behind a two-way mirror, watching her daughter talk with Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a child psychologist recommended by the police. Emma, Dr. Hoffman said gently, I want you to know that you're not in trouble. Nothing you say will get you or anyone else in trouble. I just want to understand some things, okay? Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed elephant. Does anyone ever come into your room at night, after you've gone to bed? Emma nodded again, smaller this time. Can you tell me who? Dad, Emma's voice was tiny. Not Dad, my real dad is gone, but the dad who's here now. Thomas, Dr. Hoffman clarified gently, your stepdad who adopted you. Yes. And what does he do when he comes into your room? Emma shrugged, a gesture Sarah recognized as self-protective. Just stands there, watching. It wakes me up sometimes. How does that make you feel? Scared, wrong. Emma looked up, her eyes wet. Am I bad because I'm scared of Dad? Behind the mirror, Sarah covered her mouth to muffle a sob. No, honey, you're not bad at all. It's okay to be scared. Can you tell me if Thomas has ever touched you in a way that felt wrong or made you uncomfortable? Emma shook her head. He doesn't touch me when he comes at night, but sometimes during the day, he gives me hugs that last too long, and sometimes he asks me to sit on his lap and it feels weird. Weird how? I don't know, just wrong. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. By the end, a picture had emerged. Thomas's behavior, while not crossing into explicit sexual abuse, was grooming behavior, boundary violations, testing what he could get away with. Detective Reeves stood beside Sarah behind the mirror, watching Emma with sad, knowing eyes. We see this a lot, she said quietly. The slow escalation. It starts with inappropriate attention, boundary violations, creating situations for access. If you hadn't caught it now... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. What happens next? Sarah asked. We bring Thomas in, confront him with the evidence, see what he says. And then? Depends on what he admits to. The video evidence is damning, and Emma's testimony supports a pattern of inappropriate behavior. At minimum, he'll face charges related to child endangerment, possibly more, depending on what else we find. You think there's more? It wasn't a question. Reeves looked at her, and Sarah saw the truth in her eyes. Men like Thomas don't start with their own children. There's usually a history. We'll be looking into it. They arrested Thomas at his office that evening, discreetly. Sarah wasn't there. She was at her mother's house with Emma, trying to explain the unexplainable. Mommy, did I do something wrong? Emma asked for the 100th time. No, baby. You did everything right. You told me you were uncomfortable, and I listened. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. Is Dad going to be mad at me? Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the small, fragile body that she'd failed to protect. That she'd brought Thomas into their lives, into Emma's life, and now. Dad is never going to hurt you again, Sarah said fiercely. I promise, whatever happens, I will keep you safe. But even as she said it, Sarah wondered if it was a promise she could keep. What happened now? Divorce, obviously. Criminal charges, hopefully. But the damage to Emma, the trauma, the fear, how did you fix that? Thomas called her once from the police station. Sarah let it go to voicemail. She couldn't hear his voice, couldn't listen to his explanations or denials or whatever lies he was preparing. Later, she forced herself to listen to the message. Sarah, please, I know how this looks, but you have to let me explain. It's not, I wasn't. A pause, heavy breathing, the sound of someone falling apart. I love Emma, I love you, I would never hurt her. Please, Sarah, please believe me. Sarah deleted the message and blocked his number. The investigation moved quickly once it started. Detective Reeves called Sarah 2 days later with an update that made her sick. We found images on Thomas's laptop, Reeves said, her voice gentle but firm. Not of Emma, thank God, but images of other children, hundreds of them, and browser history showing he was active in online forums discussing children. Sarah had to sit down, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. Oh, God. There's more. We tracked down 2 of his ex-girlfriends. Both had younger sisters, 9 and 11 at the time, though. Maz was dating their sisters. Both expressed that Thomas made them uncomfortable, though nothing prosecutable happened. It's a pattern, Sarah. You stopped something before it escalated into direct abuse. Should she feel grateful, relieved? Sarah felt nothing but a hollow numbness. What happens to him now? He's being charged with possession of child pornography and child endangerment. He's currently being held without bail. The prosecution feels confident about their case. Thomas Mackenzie, the man Sarah had married, the man who'd seemed so perfect, was a predator. Had always been a predator. She'd just been too blind to see it. Or had she? Sarah thought back over the past 6 years, forcing herself to look at her marriage without the rose-colored glasses of love. And now, With the clarity of hindsight, she saw the signs she'd missed. The way Thomas had been almost too eager to be Emma's father. The way he'd volunteered for bath time, bedtime, any time that gave him alone access to their daughter. The way he'd subtly discouraged Sarah from installing a lock on Emma's bedroom door. The late nights, working, that had started around the time Emma turned 6, old enough to be interesting to him. How had she not seen it? "Sarah," Reeves's voice pulled her back. "There's one more thing. We think Marcus might have been trying to warn you." "What?" "We interviewed him yesterday. He's been suspicious of Thomas for months. Said he noticed the way Thomas looked at Emma, the way he created opportunities to be alone with her. That's why he'd been coming around more. He was trying to protect Emma in his own way." The irony was crushing. Sarah had suspected her own brother, while the real predator was sharing her bed. "He asked if he could see you, talk to you. I told him I'd ask." Sarah closed her eyes. "Not yet, I can't, not yet." "I understand. Take your time." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her mother's guest room. She and Emma had been staying there since Thomas's arrest, and tried to process everything. She'd failed her daughter. She'd brought a predator into their lives and called him family. She'd been so desperate for stability, for the nuclear family dream, that she'd ignored her instincts. Emma was in therapy now, twice a week. The therapist said she'd been incredibly lucky. Thomas hadn't crossed into physical abuse. The grooming behaviors, the boundary violations, the surveillance, all of it was deeply damaging, but it could be healed with time and support. But Sarah wondered if she'd ever heal, if she'd ever trust herself again. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, Sarah had to rebuild a life from the ashes of the one that had burned down. She filed for divorce. It was quick and uncontested. Thomas's lawyer advised him not to fight it. She sold the house, unable to imagine living there again, knowing what had happened in those rooms. She found a small apartment closer to her mother, enrolled Emma in a new school with a fresh start. Some days were okay. Emma laughed, played, seemed almost normal. Other days, she woke up screaming from nightmares. She was terrified of men with Thomas's build, his coloring. She needed the bathroom light on at night and her bedroom door open. Sarah had her own nightmares. In them, she always saw Thomas standing over Emma's bed, watching. But in the dreams, she never woke up, never checked the cameras, never stopped him. Marcus came by one afternoon, 2 months after Thomas's arrest. Sarah had finally agreed to see him, though she wasn't sure why. He stood on her mother's doorstep, looking older than she remembered, tired. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something sooner, should have been more direct." "Why didn't you?" "I had no proof, just a feeling, the way he looked at her, the way he always wanted to be near her, and I thought—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought if I was wrong, if I accused him and I was wrong, it would destroy your family, destroy your trust in me. So I tried to be subtle, tried to just be present as much as possible so he wouldn't have opportunities. But I wasn't subtle enough." Sarah studied her brother's face and saw genuine remorse there, genuine guilt. "Mom told me," she said, "about the incident when you were younger with your ex's sister." Marcus flinched. "I wondered when that would come up." "Were you?" "No," he said it firmly, meeting her eyes. "I wasn't. I was an idiot 23-year-old who didn't understand boundaries, who played too rough and didn't read social cues. But I'm not like Thomas. The accusation terrified me, made me really examine my behavior. I've been careful ever since. Hyper-aware. Maybe that's why I noticed what Thomas was doing when no one else did." Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted to trust someone again. "Emma asks about you," she said finally. "She misses her Uncle Marcus." "I miss her too. Would it be okay if I visited sometime?" "Hey." Sarah thought about trust and risk and second chances. "Yes," she said, "but supervised, and we take it slow." Marcus nodded, relief washing over his face. "Of course, whatever you need. Thank you, Sarah." The trial was devastating. Sarah had to sit in a courtroom and listen to forensic experts detail what they'd found on Thomas's computer. Had to hear Thomas's lawyer argue that his client had an illness, not a crime. Had to watch Emma, brave, terrified Emma give testimony via closed-circuit television. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Thomas Mackenzie was sentenced to 15 years in prison. With good behavior, he could be out in 10. Emma would be 17 then, almost an adult. It didn't feel like enough. No sentence would feel like enough. After the sentencing, Thomas turned and looked at Sarah across the courtroom. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to see the man she'd loved. He mouthed something. It looked like "I'm sorry." Sarah looked away. 2 years later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her apartment, chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thunk-thunk-thunk of the knife against the cutting board was soothing, meditative. Through the doorway, she could hear Emma in the living room, laughing at something on TV. Emma was 9 now, still in therapy but doing better. She'd made friends at her new school. She'd joined the drama club and discovered a love of performing. She still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with trust, but she was healing. Slowly, carefully, courageously healing. Sarah had her own therapist now. They talked about guilt, about how Sarah couldn't have known, about how she'd done the right thing when it mattered. Some days, Sarah almost believed it. The security cameras in their new apartment were different. Sarah had installed them herself, but she'd learned from her mistakes. They didn't point into bedrooms. The footage was encrypted, the access carefully controlled. Sarah checked them compulsively for the first year, then gradually less as time passed and nothing happened. Marcus came by for dinner every other week. He'd met a woman, a teacher at Emma's school, actually, and they were getting serious. Emma adored her, which meant something. Sarah was learning to trust her daughter's instincts again, learning to trust her own. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would let herself think about Thomas. Wonder how she'd missed the signs for so long. But her therapist had been clear. Predators were skilled at deception. They chose vulnerable targets, created trust, exploited that trust. It wasn't Sarah's fault that she'd been fooled. But it was her victory that she'd stopped him. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reeves, who'd become a friend over the past 2 years. Thought you should know. Thomas's appeal was denied. He's going to serve his full sentence. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Relief, maybe. Justice. She texted back, "Thank you for everything." The response came quickly. "You saved your daughter. You should be proud." Sarah looked up from her phone to see Emma standing in the doorway, her dark curls falling around her face, her eyes bright and clear. "Mom, can we have movie night tonight? I want to watch something funny." "Sure, baby. What do you want to watch?" "Something with a happy ending," Emma said. Then she grinned, and it was real, reaching her eyes. "You know, like us." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "Yeah, sweetheart, like us." That night, curled up on the couch with Emma's warm weight against her side, watching some silly comedy neither of them were really paying attention to, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It was fragile, hard-won, built on the rubble of trauma and betrayal, but it was real. She'd looked into the darkness and seen the monster. She'd failed to see it soon enough, but she'd seen it eventually. She'd acted. She'd saved her daughter. Some nights, Sarah still woke in a cold sweat, remembering that timestamp. 2:47 a.m., remembering the figure standing over Emma's bed. But now, when that happened, she'd walk down the hall to Emma's room, door open, nightlight on, exactly as Emma needed it, and watch her daughter sleep. Only this time, Sarah wasn't watching for danger. She was watching a survivor, a fighter, a little girl who'd been brave enough to say, "I don't like that uncle," who'd trusted her mother enough to hint at the truth, who'd been strong enough to testify. Emma had saved herself too. And together, they'd keep saving each other, one day at a time, for as long as it took. The butterfly on Emma's coloring page, the one she'd left unfinished that first Tuesday, was completed now, hung on the refrigerator. Both wings colored in, bright and bold and beautiful. Emma had added stars around it, and at the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "I can fly now." Sarah touched the picture gently, then returned. Ed to the couch, to her daughter, to the life they were building from the pieces. Outside, the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. A new day would come tomorrow, and the day after that, and slowly, painfully, wonderfully, they would heal. Because that's what survivors do. They heal. They fly. They endure. 3 years later. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Sarah almost threw it away without reading it. She recognized the return address, the prison stamp, Thomas's handwriting on the envelope. But something made her open it. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure. Dear Sarah, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've spent every day of the past 3 years understanding what I did, why I did it, the damage I caused. I'm in therapy, real therapy, confronting the sickness in me. I loved you both. I know that sounds impossible, that what I did negates any claim to love, but it's true. I loved you, and I loved Emma, and I still became the monster you saw on that camera. That's what I'm trying to understand, how both things can be true. Emma would be 12 now. I hope she's happy. I hope she's forgotten me. I hope you both have the beautiful life you deserved, the life I destroyed. I'm sorry. I know it means nothing. I'm sorry anyway. Thomas. Sarah read the letter twice, then fed it into the paper shredder in her home office. She watched it reduce to strips, then confetti, then nothing. She felt nothing reading it. No anger, no sadness, no lingering affection. Thomas Mackenzie was a chapter in her life that had closed. The book continued without him. Mom, Emma's voice from downstairs. Can Sophia come over for dinner? Emma was 12 now, tall and confident, her trauma visible only in small ways. Her insistence on locks, her wariness around adult men she didn't know, her fierce protectiveness of her younger friends. But she was thriving. Honor roll student, lead in the school play, captain of her debate team. She'd become someone who spoke up, who trusted her instincts, who knew her voice mattered. Of course, Sarah called back. Tell her 6 o'clock. Sarah heard Emma's excited phone call, her daughter's laughter echoing through their home. A home with locks on every door, cameras pointed outward, not inward, safety built into every corner. A home where Emma could fly. And that, Sarah thought, was the only ending that mattered. Not Thomas's apology, or his imprisonment, or his eventual release years from now. What mattered was Emma's laughter, the sound of healing, the proof that darkness could be survived, that trust could be rebuilt, that childhood could be reclaimed even after it was stolen. Sarah deleted the email notification about Thomas's letter from her phone, then went downstairs to start dinner. The story wasn't about Thomas Mackenzie. It never had been. It was about a mother who listened, a daughter who spoke, a family that survived, and a butterfly that learned to fly with both wings colored in. That evening, as Sarah set the table for dinner, 3 places now, with Emma's friend Sophia joining them, she caught sight of her daughter through the window. Emma was in the backyard, talking animatedly to Sophia, her hands gesturing wildly as she told some story. The last rays of sunlight caught her dark curls, made them shine copper and gold. Emma looked up suddenly, caught Sarah watching, and grinned. Waved. A simple gesture, but it contained everything: trust, love, safety. Sarah waved back, her throat tight with emotion. They'd made it through, both of them together. And that was the only story that mattered. The end came not with a bang, but with a moment of peace. With dinner on the table and laughter in the air, and a daughter who was learning, slowly but surely, that the world could be safe again. It was enough. It was everything. The end. Epilogue, 5 years after. Emma Mackenzie stood at the podium, her hands only slightly trembling as she looked out at the audience. 16 years old, poised and articulate, about to give a speech that terrified and empowered her in equal measure. My name is Emma Mackenzie, she began, and I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. In the audience, Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Emma had debated for months whether to go public with her story, whether to add her voice to the movement of survivors speaking out. Sarah had supported whatever choice she made, but privately she'd hoped her daughter would find the courage. Emma had found it. I was 7 years old when my stepfather began grooming me. He never touched me sexually. We caught it before it escalated that far. But the psychological abuse, the boundary violations, the way he made me feel unsafe in my own home, that was abuse. That was trauma. And for a long time, I thought maybe it didn't count because it wasn't bad enough. Emma's voice grew stronger. But here's what I learned. Abuse is taboo. See, trauma is trauma. Your pain is valid even if someone else's seems worse. Your voice matters. And if something feels wrong, if someone makes you uncomfortable, you have the right to speak up. You have the right to be heard. She paused, finding Sarah in the crowd, made eye contact, smiled. My mom believed me. That's what saved me. She listened to a 7-year-old who could barely articulate what was wrong, and she investigated. She acted. She protected me. And I'm standing here today because one person, my mom, decided that my discomfort mattered more than social niceties or family harmony or giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Sarah was openly crying now, and she didn't care who saw. So if you're a parent, Emma continued, please listen to your kids, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the accusations seem impossible, even when it means upending your whole life. Believe them, investigate, protect them. And if you're a kid who's being hurt or who feels unsafe, tell someone. Keep telling people until someone listens. Your voice matters, you matter, and you deserve to be safe. Emma finished her speech to thunderous applause. Sarah met her backstage, pulling her into a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you, Sarah whispered. I learned from the best, Emma whispered back. They stood there together, mother and daughter, survivors both, and Sarah thought about the security camera footage that had changed everything. That timestamp, 2:47 a.m., would always be seared into her memory. But now, when she thought of it, she didn't just see the horror. She saw the moment everything changed. The moment she chose to see what she didn't want to see. The moment she chose her daughter over everything else. Mom, Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can we get ice cream? Sarah laughed through her tears. Absolutely, whatever you want. As they walked out together into the evening sun, Sarah felt the weight of the past finally, truly lifting. They would always carry the scars, but they were more than their trauma. They were survivors, fighters, voices speaking truth into the darkness. And most importantly, they were free. The butterfly had fully emerged from its cocoon, wings strong and bright, ready to soar. And soar it did.